الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Alhamdulillah, we resume our fiqh lessons after a significant break for a few reasons. Nonetheless, alhamdulillah, we'll resume now, and we're covering the chapter of nikah, the kitab of nikah, and we're right at the end of the kitab of nikah. And the topics that we'll be covering in this last part of kitab al-nikah, before we move on to kitab al-talaq, the chapter of talaq and the rules and regulations and the legislations and the guidelines of our sharia about talaq and the different types of it, and the talaq sunni and bid'i and etc. The last topic here is the kitab of rida', the chapter about feeding or breastfeeding children and what are the rules and regulations around that. It's a very important topic because it has an impact in, for example, in muharramat, as in women that you are not allowed to get married to. Also has an impact on, there is a big discussion, significant discussion between the fuqaha as to, what is the time frame, how many years is the child supposed to be breastfed. There's also a discussion about, which is, I don't want to get into it too much, but there is a big mas'ala and a big issue that comes out from time to time, which is the rida' of kabir, which is a mas'ala that's quite a confusing mas'ala, quite a controversial mas'ala, if you like, which is breastfeeding beyond the years of childhood, which is a mas'ala that comes up sometimes, like I said before. I will touch upon it, but not necessarily go into it too much. Nonetheless, let's start off, and as is the norm in fiqh, we go into, we take the word, we take the kalima that we're trying to understand, and we look at it from a linguistic and a istilahi perspective. So first of all, الرضاع بفتح الراء وكسرها يطلق في اللغة على شرب اللبن من ثدي المرأة والبهيمة مطلقة. So in lugha, in language, there is one meaning of رضاع or رضاع, and there is also in sharia a more specific, a more fiqhi meaning to it. Generally in the language itself, it means also to suckle a child, whether it be this is a word that can be used for humans and otherwise, but when it comes to sharia, it means مص الرضيع اللبن من ثدي امرأة آدمية. When it comes to sharia and the technical meaning, the shar'i meaning of the word rada' or rida' is when the child consumes milk from his or her mother's breast, which is from suckling or otherwise, which we'll come to in a minute. But the point being is that the leban and the milk reaches from the mother to the child's stomach, and it nourishes the child, whether it be a lot or a more, or a lot or a tiny amount, or is it one time feeding or multiple times. These are all issues that we'll cover inshallah azza wa jal. So first issue that he's clarifying is لا يفرق في الرضاع من ثدي امرأة من كونها بكرا أو ثيبا. That whether the woman that feeds the child is a married woman or an unmarried woman, single woman or a married woman, it makes no difference. The moment she feeds the child the milk and the milk reaches the child's stomach, from that moment onwards, the rules and regulations of rida' come into action. What are they? From them is that she becomes his mother in that technical sense. There is no marriage between them. Also, any other children that she feeds, that same woman, also become his or her siblings from the same mother, from their breastfeeding, and so they are not allowed to intermarry between them as well. So siblings of the same breastfeeding mother, if you like, are also not allowed, haram for them to marry between themselves. So these are some of the rules and regulations that come into it. So whether the woman is married or unmarried, if the feeding is done, then she becomes technically his mother, as in breastfeeding mother, and the rules of rada' and rida' come into action, and this is the opinion of the jumhur of the fuqaha. ولا بين كونها متزوجة أو غير متزوجة. Whether she's a virgin or not a virgin, whether she's married or unmarried, has no impact as long as rada' and rida' itself takes place. وخالف في هذا أحمد بن حنبل, and this opinion has been differed in by Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullahi alayhi, who said that the woman that can breastfeed and the breastfeeding rules that come into action can only be from the woman who has been married before. And for a single woman or for a virgin woman, these rules do not apply. But this is in stark opposition and in difference to what the Jumhur and the majority of the Fuqaha have maintained and have opined, which is that whether the woman is virgin or single or unmarried, it does not matter as long as the Rada' itself takes place. The hukum and the rules and regulations of Rada' come into play. أن وقد سوى الجمهور أيضا بين أن يمتص الرضيع من ثدي المرأة أو يحلب اللبن من في وعاء. Now whether the breastfeeding is done directly, physically, or the milk is put into a container and fed to the child thereafter, it is also in effect the same thing. So it could be, sometimes it is possible to store breast milk, and if that happens and someone consumes that or the child consumes that thereafter, then that is in terms of its technical effect, it's still the same thing, i.e. the milk belongs to the mother and the child also becomes the mother's breastfeeding child upon consumption and consuming that milk. So this is also the opinion of the Jumhur of the Fuqaha. And again, Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullahi alayhi has differed on that, which is that it has to be directly, physically consumed by the child from the breast of his mother or his breastfeeding mother, i.e. the woman, right? And then the next one, وَأَمَّا sin, and there are a few issues which are to be covered. Next issues. The first issue is that is there a difference between a single woman, a virgin woman, and a non-virgin woman, or a single woman and a married woman? The answer is that Jumhur of the Fuqaha have said it doesn't matter if the woman is single or otherwise. The breastfeeding has its rules and regulations and it has its impact. Second issue is, does it have to be a physical suckling, or could it be something that's contained or put into a container? Does it still have the same impact? We have again said, the Jumhur of the Fuqaha have said yes, even if it is stored in a container and fed from thereafter, the rules will apply. Again, Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullahi alayhi has said otherwise. وَأَمَّا sin, as for the age, what is the age which is for breastfeeding? وَأَمَّا السن الذي يكون فيه الرضاع فقال أبو حنيفة رحمة الله عليه هو السنتين ونصف. According to Imam Abu Hanifa رحمة الله عليه, the age for breastfeeding is 2.5 years. 2.5 years. So from his adillah and from his main dalil is وفصاله وحمله وفصاله 30 شهرا, in which Allah is saying that his separation, if you like, and his haml, the child's carrying, or it's being in the womb, if you like. The translation and tafsir is where actually the difference is between the fuqaha, but nonetheless there is mention of 30 months. Other fuqaha have understood from وَحَمْلُهُ وَفِصَالُهُ 30 شهرا, that inshallah we'll come to their opinion in a moment. But Abu Hanifa said rahmatullahi alayhi that the time for breastfeeding is allowed to be up to 2.5 years, that a child is allowed to suckle from his mother. And any child that suckles from a woman within this time, whether it be from his own mother or someone else, from an aunt or from a neighbor, or any woman in that regard, within this time frame of 2.5 years, the rules of rada', the rules of rida', of breastfeeding, will come into action, i.e. the woman will become haram for him to marry, or his siblings from that same woman who have been breastfed also by her will also become haram for him or her to marry, and so on. All the rules and regulations of rida' will come in. So the main point is Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi has said 2.5 years. وقال الزفر, and Zufar is one of the A'imma and the Ulama and the Mujtahideen of the Hanafi school of law also. He is one of the students of Sayyidina Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi. He has said that the period is 3 years, and as to why 3 years, he has a discussion, and you can find it further in the bigger books of fiqh, but we don't want to get too much into it. Abu Hanifa said 2.5 years, Zufar rahmatullahi alayhi said 3 years. As for the stronger opinion and the reliable and the strongest opinion on the issue, i.e. how many years should the child be breastfed, والشافعي وأحمد بن حنبل ومحمد بن الحسن الشيباني وأبو يوسف, they all have said that this should be, the breastfeeding period is sanatain, is 2 years. Why? Because Allah said وفصاله في عامين, that the child's fisal, i.e. separation from his mother or her mother, i.e. from breastfeeding, is 2 years. There are also ahadith to that effect, and also the ayah which Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah has used as evidence they also use that same ayah, but they understand it to say that وَحَمْلُهُ وَفِصَالُهُ ثَلَاثُونَ شَهْرًا, that the child's being in haml, being in his or her mother's womb during pregnancy and the breastfeeding is altogether 30 months. So what does that mean? It means that the minimum pregnancy is 6 months. We know in fiqh that the minimum pregnancy period could be 6 months, minimum. Maximum could be more, 9, 10, or even more months. And there's ikhtilaf between the fuqaha about that also. But the minimum number of months for a pregnancy, according to the fuqaha, is 6 months. And so 6 months take away from 30 is left with what? 24. And 24 months is what? 2 years. So the fuqaha have said, i.e. Abu Yusuf and Muhammad and Shafi'i and Ahmad ibn Hanbal, they all say that breastfeeding is 2 years based on this ayah and other ayat and other ahadith also, i.e. the child who is breastfed by his or her own mother or any other woman, okay, the breastfeeding period is within 2 years. And it should not be beyond that, and after that, towards the end of it, they should slowly be getting off of that and trying to get used to having other types of foods, as well as for the rules of radha' to come into effect, it should have to be within this 2 year time frame. Abu Hanifa said 2.5, the majority of the fuqaha have said 2 years, and Zufar rahmatullah alayhi said 3 years, and other fuqaha have said even more. Other fuqaha have said even more. But that's not the point of our discussion today. We want to just focus on these three because these are sort of the most, you could like, to be honest, the opinion of the 2 years is the strongest. Okay, أما حكم الرضاع, as for the rules that come out of, are come into effect because of radha', are, for example, that, you know, the as you've said before, the woman that feeds becomes his mother technically, and the children from that same woman, as in have been fed by the same woman, have also become like his siblings, and there is no marriage between them. And Allah says in the Quran, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُكُمْ وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ وَعَمَّاتُكُمْ وَخَالَاتُكُمْ وَبَنَاتُ الْأَخِ وَبَنَاتُ الْأُخْتِ وَأُمَّهَاتُكُمُ اللَّاتِي أَرْضَعْنَكُمْ, and the mothers who have breastfed you. وَأُمَّهَاتُكُمُ اللَّاتِي أَرْضَعْنَكُمْ وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ مِنَ الرَّضَاعَةِ, and also your siblings from the same woman who's breastfed you. So, and there's also the story of which comes later on inshallah, which is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam divided and separated separated between a Sahabi and a Sahabiyya, even though they were married for a long time, and then a woman came and said that I actually breastfed you both, so you're siblings, so you can't be married. And so the Prophet ﷺ first turned away, and then after she insisted that I breastfed both of them, they were forced to separate. Because they are technically brothers and sisters from the same breastfeeding mother. So up to here, and then we have a very important topic so we've spoken about the mother, whether she's the breastfeeding mother, if you like, whether she's single or married or otherwise, has no impact. She is still considered to be the breastfeeding mother. Second issue, does it have to be physically from the breast itself, or could it be from a bottle or otherwise? We said it's the same effect also. Third issue was the number of months, the amount of time in which the feeding should occur. We said the strongest opinion is 2 years, but there is also the opinion of 2.5 years and even 3 years or more. But the strongest and most reliable opinion within the Hanafi school of law and outside also is 2 years. As for how much milk must be consumed, is there a minimum amount which must be consumed by the child for him to be, or her to be considered the child of this woman from breastfeeding? There are also differences between the fuqaha, and يرى الحنفية أنه لا يشترط عدد معين. There is no, as for the Hanafi school of law, they have maintained that there is no number. It could be as long as the child has been fed, whether it's once, whether it's twice, as long as the milk reaches the stomach of the child, then it's done. The breastfeeding has been done, and the rules of breastfeeding also come into play, come into action. Now, is the same? Okay, he's not mentioning here, he's going to mention Shafi'i, and I think he might mention it, but let me come to that. But he's mentioning Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, so you're saying in the Malik it's the same thing as well. Khalas, you're Maliki, so you know. وَلَا مِقْدَارٌ مُعَيَّن, there is no fixed amount also. So it is not, because in other schools of law you'll find that they say five rada'at, that 5 full feedings must take place. And they have their evidences for that, the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, for example, and etc. And there is also counter argument, and this is why I love this book. It's so like really good for these debates and back and forth. وَقَالُوا and وَقُلْنَا وَوَلَنَا وَلَهُمْ, the debates between the evidences. This kitab is called بدايع الصنائع في ترتيب الشرائع by Al-Imam Al-Kasani rahmatullah alayhi, one of the great fuqaha of the Hanafi school of law, who passed away in the year 587 Hijri. But it's an amazing book which compiles, for example, if you just look at it, if you look at just one of the issues here, it's talking about what we're just talking about now. I just obviously had done a bit of extra reading to get a bit more of an insight on the topic. But he will, for example, bring the evidences that they have for the Hanafi school of law, or Abu Yusuf has, or Muhammad has, or Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi has, and in the Shafi'iyah what the evidence that they have, and what are the answers, and back and forth like that, but in detail. He will not just say, for example, indicatively, or they say so and they're wrong. He will actually go into a full debate and talk about it, deal with it, and then move on. Of course, in the end, it's Hanafi, so he will always give strength and weight to the Hanafi school of law, because that's what he considers to be the strongest. But nonetheless, the point being is, according to the Hanafi school of law, there is no number, and there is no amount that's specified. Any amount and any number of times a child is breastfed it is considered that the child has been breastfed, and the rules and the laws of breastfeeding come into effect. If there is doubt, however, that has the milk reached the stomach of the child or otherwise, then rada' and breastfeeding has not been completed, because we have to be certain that it's reached. If there is also, for example, two women have fed and we're not sure which one is more and which one is not, which one is reached and which one is not, then we'd also have to verify as well. If that milk was, for example, put into a container and mixed with other fluids, for example a juice or otherwise, whichever fluid is more in amount is what takes the effect. So if it was juice that's more, or water that's more, then the rule of rada' will not come into play. But if it was more milk and less water when it was mixed up, then the hukm of rada' will come into effect. So we're just talking about mixing possibilities, but nonetheless, any amount that reaches is the opinion of the Hanafi school of law. وقال الشافعي الرضاع, the amount or the number of times that make it, i.e. haram, the effects that makes the woman haram for the child to marry, and etc. The muharrim, the number of rada'at is at least five rada'at. Fi zaman al-rada'a, within the 2 years of breastfeeding. I.e. if it's less than 5 feedings, then that child is not technically considered to be the child of that woman from breastfeeding. If it is 5 but outside of 2 years, then also no effect. So it has to be 5 within the 2 years. Furthermore, of course, we know generally speaking, it doesn't necessarily mean that only one woman can be the breastfeeding mother of that child. It could be more than one woman. Maybe his auntie as well, maybe a neighbor, maybe someone that was serving in the house as well. Whatever. The point being is, as long as 5 complete rada'at have been, feedings has been provided to the child within the 2 year time frame, then that's when the hukum and the ahkam and the rules and regulations of rada' come into play. That's according to Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayhi, 5. وقال Ahmad, and Ahmad rahmatullah alayhi, who is Ahmad ibn Hanbal, says it should be at least 3 rada'at, 3 complete feedings for it to be coming into play. And he's saying here, who is of course the doctor himself is Hanafi in madhab, so he says والأرجح في هذه المسألة قول أبي حنيفة لظاهر قوله وأمهاتكم اللاتي أرضعنكم, and he's saying the strongest opinion in the mas'ala is the opinion of Sayyidina Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi, because Allah says in the Quran وأمهاتكم اللاتي أرضعنكم, he mentions that your mothers who have fed you, he has not said who have fed you 3 times or 4 times or 5 times, he said أرضعنكم mutlaqan, i.e. without any specific amount or number. So therefore any feeding will be considered to be breastfeeding as long as it reaches the stomach and the jawf of the child. So we've covered a few different issues, and the one that we just covered right now is talking about the amount of milk and the number of times the feeding has to occur for the rada' to be completed. According to Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayhi, it is any amount and any number of times. Shafi'i, 5. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, 3. Now we come to how do we, for example, how do we establish whether what's the evidence? How do we verify if someone has really been breastfed by that person? So of the evidences is iqrar. Someone confesses, I've been breastfed by this woman, or I have breastfed this child. Okay? Or the other is bayyinah, evidence that, i.e., for example, they saw the mother feeding the child, they saw the woman feeding the child, and etc. So some people say, some people of aql say, some intellectual, some people state that even if one woman sees and witnesses the breastfeeding taking place, then this is yakfi. But this is not a acceptable qawl, because what's accepted is about to come. لحديث عقبة, this is one of the opinions, as in this is not the accepted opinion in the Hanafi school of law, others may take it. What's the evidence for that? Uqba ibn al-Harith, the hadith of Uqba ibn al-Harith, وفيه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم divided between a man and a woman who were married before, بإخبار امرأة زعمت أنها أرضعته هو وزوجته. That a woman came and they described her to be a woman of sort of African, I think, background. She came and she breastfed both of them, and she came and testified and said that I breastfed both of you, so how can you be married, and etc. And so the Prophet ﷺ told the zawj, the husband, to separate between, or basically divided between them and separated between them. So the fact that one testimony of one woman who fed them was taken into consideration, and the Prophet ﷺ divided between them because of that, is evidence for them that the witness and the testimony of one person is enough to establish رضاعة has taken place. وقال قوم لابد من شهادة اثنين من نساء كما قال تعالى أن تضل إحداهما فتذكر إحداهما الأخرى. And some people have said there have to be at least two women who testify to this. وقال أبو حنيفة, as Abu Hanifa رحمة الله عليه, he says that there has to be at least two men or one man and two women who testify to this. And the reason why he says that is because the testimony and the witnessing of only women is only accepted where there is no possibility of men witnessing that incident. So for example, when it comes to childbirth, there's no possibility of men witnessing that, or at least in the time of, when it's a Muslim doctor or an Islamic country and etc. But as for breastfeeding, it's possible for her maharim to see that. For example, her zawj, her husband may see that. Or for example, her father may walk by and she's feeding, and so that's also another witness. Or her brother. And this being around your maharim, a woman that's a mahram to you while she's breastfeeding, is permitted. Khalas? So that's why Abu Hanifa rahmatullah has maintained that there has to be at least one man and two women, or two men. Whereas the Shafi'i rahmatullah says that four women will also suffice. But the point being is that this is, in our time and age, there are usually multiple narrators of the incident that, this person has been breastfed by that person. And in fact, even more than that, hardly there are, not hardly, but a lot of women don't breastfeed their children nowadays. Which is not a good thing, because even according to the doctors, and even when you go to the hospital, where they always advise you that you should breastfeed your child if you can, because it's better for the child, it's better for you. There are so many benefits, so many nutrients, so many nutritions. There's no milk that can come close to it. Even the Aptamil and Cowan Gate and all this, the other milks, the powder milks that you can mix, and it does not match. Some women, they have some breastfeeding as well as that. Nonetheless, whatever works best, whatever is easier, but it's recommended strongly that breastfeeding should be done for children, because this is better for them. Where possible, this should be followed. There is also an issue that comes up that's a bit of a confusion sometimes, that when the breastfeeding takes place, should the mother be paid a fee for that? Because Allah says that when they are فَإِنْ أَرْضَعْنَ لَكُمْ فَآتُوهُنَّ ujurahun, right, in Surah Al-Talaq, that if they breastfeed your children for you, then give them their wages. And so some people think that this is even talking about all women, but this ayah is only talking about the situation of talaq, i.e., if there is a separation between the husband and the wife, there's been a divorce, and the child needs to be breastfed, then we know that the whole the rules of expenditure is upon the father of the child. Okay, and so because that is from the food, the types of nutrients and nutrition. So if the woman then feeds, i.e., the child's own mother, but there's been a separation between them. Okay, if she demands that you pay me a fee for doing so because this is your child, and if I didn't do it, then you'd have to go and hire somebody else to do it. So give me my fee. She has a right for that fee. Or any other woman in that regard, if she feeds the child, she has a right for that fee. As for if you're married and you're husband and wife, then there is no fee. Because the fact that you're spending upon each other and you're staying in the same house and etc., this is the fee itself. So there's a confusion sometimes, we have this misunderstanding. There is no fee in that regard. The other issue that I spoke about before, a fatwa that comes up every now and then, which is what if the rule of a grown-up having breast milk of another woman, does it have any effect? Whether it be in a container or otherwise. And this entire incident comes from the situation that's narrated by Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha of a Sahabi and a Sahabiyya before the ayat of hijab came down, of hijab and rules and regulations of men and women, their hijab and their awra and etc., the separation and segregation, all of that. Okay, they had adopted a child, a Sahabi and a Sahabiyya adopted a child. And when the ayat of hijab came, there was this Sahabiyya went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, I don't know what to do. Because this son of ours, we've adopted him, but he's not our real child. I haven't breastfed him at all. So how does he live with us now? So the Prophet ﷺ gave her an answer and said, let him have some of your milk. And this is when he's bigger. He's got beard. He's a grown-up person. So then she said, but he's big. And so he said, well, I know that he's big. So now here the biggest confusion and the biggest sort of disgust, if you like, in your mind comes from imagining that this is directly from the physical body, but we've already established that it could be from a container. Right? So that's the first solution to that, and this is one of the ways to sort of deal with that, because the incident is true. It's narrated, it happened, and it did happen, and Aisha radiallahu anha stood by that as well. And in fact, all of the other azwaj and the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they sort of said that this could be something that was only specifically for this particular Sahabi, and it's not to be shared with other people. It was just a specific scenario and a specific solution given for that. So this happened, and she then went and sort of gave some milk, and and then that situation passed on. And then it's narrated that Aisha radiallahu anha considered this to be reliable, and even after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, she permitted it amongst other women and other people. But all of the other Sahaba, all of the other wives of the Prophet ﷺ have said that this is a specific scenario only for this particular Sahabi. And it's not happened afterwards, and it shouldn't happen afterwards. So that's the debate. And the point being is that the majority, all of the Sahaba and all of the Fuqaha, except for just a few, maybe one or two, have said that this is only applicable, that rada' and breastfeeding is only possible for a young child, within the age of 2 years or 2.5 years, and the age that we spoke about before. As for if it was to happen thereafter, then generally, and for the rest of the ummah, there is no effect, only in that fixed circumstance that was narrated, or that's narrated in history at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, only for that circumstance. Now, I've said it very vaguely, haven't mentioned any names. The discussions are there in the books of fiqh. Again, we don't want to get into it too much, but the point being is, if the issue does come up, every now and then, maybe a fatwa, for example, someone might say this or that, we know now that this issue is only a specific circumstance that was legislated for at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's not for anybody else. It's not for anybody else. This is mansukh, if you like. It was basically nasakh and mansukh. It was abrogated, and the rule does no longer last. As for why and how, that's for the books of extended fiqh. This is more or less a primer and a basic fiqh lesson, we know that, right? Even though we do mention madhahib and what are the opinions, but it's not really that much in depth. It's not fiqh muqaran or that deep anyway. For khair, inshallah, this is up to what we'll cover now. If there are any questions, we'll take. Otherwise, we'll end it here. Before we move on to talaq. Talaq will be the next topic.
You know that situation right there about whether that was specifically for that person was a general. You know, recently, I'm not going to say any names.
Yeah.
How you know, some of the contemporaries, I'm not sure to say the name,
Yeah.
but how they took that view that it is general and then it's for everyone. But you know, recently, how people have been slandering scholars who took that view,
Mm-hmm.
and in face, how would you like? It's a bit different, but how would you recommend like dealing with people like that?
Okay.
It's a bit different.
Yes, the issue. Look again. This is a fiqh mas'ala that has got asl. What it is in fiqh, we understand and we respect and we stand by this. When there is solid and strong evidence and there is an opinion that's been taken seriously by a sahabi or a sahabi, a reliable scholar basically, whether you agree with it or not, you have no rights to go on slander or speak ill of. You can say it's wrong, you can say it's incorrect, you can say I disagree, but for you to go personally and attack those people is just not scholastic at all. It's not academic. We don't do that. In fiqh, you don't do that. In fact, in any science, you don't do that. You may disagree with Newton or Einstein. You don't go out there and start swearing at him or his family or saying he's useless or whatever, because we know who they were. And so Aisha radiallahu anha, she's known for who she was. And the fuqaha that have taken by her view also are known. They're not just anybody's. Abu Dawud al-Zahiri, for example, took by their opinion, who is from the Zahiri madhab. He's not any Tom, Dick and Harry. He's a serious faqih. So for us to just go and disregard, it's just basically silly of us and shows that we're ignorant if we do that. So slandering and speaking ill of is not correct. You can critique and negate and argue and counter-argue all you like within the discussions of academia. Apart from that, you have no rights to do that. We know that. That's for any mas'ala. Another question? Okay, any other questions? No? Alhamdulillah. Okay, so inshallah, next time we'll go into chapter of talaq. And I know Hajj Khalil was here with me even last time when we done this. Kitab of Nikah and Talaq. Alhamdulillah. May Allah accept from all of us. Taqabbalallahu minna minkum. Subhanakallahumma ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.